Hola a todos, hola a todas. Hello, hi everyone. We have today the pleasure to talk with one of the most important voices about the study in distant education, the Professor Terry Anderson. He is now in Alberta, in Edmonton, Canada. And we are very happy with Ezequiel Passeron from the NGO Faro Digital to talk with you. Hello, Harry, how are you?
I am
Terry,
fine.
how are you? Everything is okay?
Everything is fine, and I'm glad to be able to talk to you and Ezequiel and many others who hopefully will be watching. Greetings, Canada.
Terry, the first question is a very general question. How are you live the last year? This is very special year, you know, in your, if you want, in your personal life, but especially about your professional activity, you know, because we know that you are studying the impact of the technology in higher education, especially in distant education, the last 20, 30 years. And the last year in this sense was very important. So we would like to know your opinion about this special period for the distant education.
Sure. Well, maybe I can say the most overused word in English about the COVID is it's unprecedented. And people say that over and over and over again. And they act as if we've never had a plague in the history of human civilization before, just because it struck us personally as much as this one has. Having said that, I think it's been a huge learning opportunity for teachers, for learners, for parents. And I don't think it'll ever go back to being the only way one can learn is in a classroom. And I know that as distance educators, we've been preaching that for so long. But nonetheless, a lot of people had not experienced an online education. And having said that, I'm not saying that the kind of online education that everyone has been getting has been appreciated by students or teachers. Sometimes they're forced into it. But secondly, some of the quality issues, the lack of expertise, the lack of hardware, the lack of a place and a time to do it, all create challenges that most distance educators and distance education students, they've realized, you know, they need a nice quiet place in order to study. They need a schedule. They need this and that. And so when you just throw everyone into an environment, it's bound to have problems and concerns. But having said that, I think it's a good experience for people to realize that that they don't have to go to a school all the time to learn everything. That there's all kinds of opportunities for formal education. But I think there's been a real increase in informal learning, where people just have time to watch YouTube videos about how to fix the car or whatever it is that they want to learn about.
I'm mute.
The typical thing this year.
These things of online life, right? Terry, I totally agree. And in this sense, we wanted to ask you, in your opinion, which are the main contributions that distance education made to the educational system as a whole, no? Especially in traditional higher education, that it's your expertise, but also, which are the main unresolved challenges that distance education have?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the distance education or online education has always had as a primary concern to increase access and access for people like people often think, you know, well, in Canada, it's so empty and no people around that's why people take distance education, but they don't. They take distance education because it's flexible and gives them access at home. The people who take distance education in Canada, by and large, live in big cities close to universities, but they take online because it allows them to shift time or shift places. So that, to me, is the biggest contribution. The challenges, or what we yet need to do, is I think it's been really interesting that now that real-time synchronous, like we're doing right this moment, is now become available at very low cost. And previous in my day of working through audio conferencing and very clumsy computer systems with very low bandwidth, the kind of tools that one can experience here in tools like Zoom, just have not been available in the past. And so I think we need to learn what kind of learning activities, what kind of mix of small group activities, how to use social media so that, it engages people in better ways than, just taking a classroom lecture and just booming it onto Zoom is bound to be less than satisfactory if that's all you do. So it's a different way of teaching, a different way of learning, and it will take time for us to become become expert online learners. But the nice thing about it is that it opens doors to lifelong learning. That just sitting in front of a teacher and thinking that the only way I can learn is if I go to school, that's not a very good training for lifelong learning.
David, this is a very general question, but I think that you are the ideal person to ask this question. Because for decades you have studied and investigated the emergence and the development of distance education, and not only in Canada, around the world. We know that you study this phenomenon in China and Spain, Colombia, everywhere. So, in your opinion, and this question is with the idea to share your opinion with our student and the people that try to study now the distance education. So I would like to know your opinion about which are the main milestones to have marked the evolution of this model during the last this 21st century, this last 20 years approximately, when we start to live in the digital society. Because we know that before the digital society, we had other distance education model, but it's so different that at the model that we are experiencing now.
Yeah. Well, there's an old saying that the net changes everything, and I think that the increased flexibility, I guess, and power of networking, and networking in the sense of being able to access content, like the difference between a person doing research when they can get all the articles on Google Scholar with Sci-Hub or something like that. We have such a vast quantity of content that is accessible, and it can be from YouTube videos or from Khan Academy or from MOOCs, or it goes on and on and on. So that's the one side. But on the second side is just the interpersonal interactions that are supported. And so you can see that being used for very stupid things on Facebook and lots of other social media sites. But you can also see how on sites like Reddit, where people ask questions, where they develop respect for each other and a community of problem solvers. And they can do this without actually participating themselves for a long time. They can just watch what other people are doing. And human beings are great at that kind of social learning, where we can see how somebody else answered that question, and then when we get brave enough, we can jump in and contribute ourselves. But there's the power of the net to allow us to get content and get interactions with people are unprecedented.
When you were saying, Terry, about Reddit, it just came to my mind the GameStop subject this previous weeks, that I think that it's a perfect example of the power to social interactions and groups of youth, especially. It's incredible.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, here in Spain, but in other parts of the world too, a significant part of virtual universities are managed by private companies. Of course, there are a lot of efforts from public spaces, but most of it are private companies, right? So,
Yeah.
which risk and opportunities you think that this can entail?
Yeah. Well, I guess the free enterprise and business, it gives a capacity to change very rapidly, to adapt to different conditions, but it's always, I guess, tainted with the idea that they're not really interested in teaching and learning as much as they're interested in making money, and the way they make money is to provide service, which hopefully people are consuming from a knowledgeable standpoint and not being exploited. But we certainly saw in the explosion of online learning that happened about 8 years ago in the United States, where there were thousands of online institutes that opened up, and the government gave the students loans, which they transferred to these companies. And many of these companies are now no longer in existence. Whatever degree they gave or credentials they issued are suspect, and the students are left with student debt. So I think there's lessons to be learned that at least in Canada, we don't have that many private companies, but the ones that are quite highly regulated from what they can do, what they can advertise, and what they can say. And I know in other countries, notably the United States, that regulation is much, much less. And I'm not sure how it is in Spain, but I think different countries have different experiences with these kind of entrepreneurial education systems. Having said that, they can react quickly. They can get like if you look at how I imagine at the University of Barcelona to get a new degree, and it probably takes 3 or 4 years, whereas it takes 2 or 3 weeks for a private company to do that. So they have some advantages, but they can certainly create havoc in the formal education system, I think.
Yeah, well, in this sense, I'm connected with this pandemic scenario. I don't know what is your opinion, but many people before the pandemic say that the traditional university and with face-to-face model, for example, need to change some model to teaching and learning, incorporate more digital tools, for example, and because the analogic tradition was so strong, in this kind of university, consider that the pandemic scenario included very, very bad thing, because it was not a nice period to live, but a fine opportunity in this sense. What kind of opportunity do you think that this new scenario could be useful for the traditional university? What kind of opportunity, that transfer this process, probably connected with a little bit more with the social digital society, can be experienced? Can we experience the traditional university from now? From now, in the thanks the pandemic scenario.
Yeah. Well, I think that there will be many people who will realize that they don't have to go to the university to go to a meeting, for instance. They can meet as we're meeting right now. They realize now that they don't have to go to the library. They can find the information on their computers. They realize now that they can teach a course when they're away at a conference or something like that. And so they start to see things that, and then sorry, from a pedagogical point of view, they start to realize that asking students to do collaborative work using Google Docs or something like that, they start to realize that, wow, you can the capacity to support collaborative and cooperative learning has really been magnified because of the experience of COVID. And it's also interesting if you look at the backlash that there is now against formal examinations and the kind of exams that can be marked by machines, and we've been, as educators, I think we've been very lazy in using examination systems, which we know are not very efficient, that they discriminate against people who have high levels of anxiety. And the old joke is that the person who succeeds is somebody who forgets the information after the exam instead of before the exam. They're going to forget the information anyways. So what difference does it make if they know it at one moment and then it's gone? So there has been research on more effective ways to evaluate through portfolios, through project-based learning, through reflection. But we found it a lot easier to have everyone come in and sit in a big gymnasium and write an examination for 3 hours. So I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that we'll start to realize that that kind of examination, it may have a small place in education, but it shouldn't be the defining feature that it is. And in some countries, it's even worse than in other countries, the pressure from these final examinations.
Yes, Terry. I wanted to ask you, how do you see let's talk a little bit about teachers, right? Do you think they have the skills and the digital competences or abilities? And if you think that we need much more training spaces to talk to each other, how can we connect as a true, real network of teachers in order to gain and be aware of all the possibilities as you are describing it, but also the challenges of online education?
Yeah. Well, of course, I think that that some of our colleagues lack the skills. It's very some people are very skilled and some people are very not skilled in using digital tools. So it's not universal. But the problem when we say, oh, well, we have to have more professional development for teachers, the record shows that the professional development that we traditionally give by having people get together either online or in a classroom and hear some expert talk to them for an hour, 2 or 3, and then they go back to their classroom, very little change happens. It's really hard to take professional education as it's currently delivered and turn it into action or see evidence base that it really works. But what we do know is that people rely on networks of friends, the teacher down the hall, somebody who's tried this and said that this works good. And so I think we really need to stress the making the tools available, but also leadership, so that a dean or a chairman, takes the effort to develop a community, an online community, and not a community that's going to meet on Friday afternoon for an hour and then never meet again, but rather one that's going to be throughout the organization. And those can be organized at a discipline level for the physics teachers in this university, or the physics teachers in Spain, or the physics teachers around the world. You can have different granularities and levels. But once people start to realize, the power that they can, that they have, I think that they will be self-sustaining. But there is a problem that we talk about the success stories like Reddit or Wikipedia, and we think, oh, wow, let's just do that. Let's set up our own Wikipedia for our teachers. But in Canada, we call it a cold start problem, because these networks don't become useful until a lot of people use them, and they're not used until they become useful. So it gets it hard to sort of start these systems, and once they gain a critical mass, then like other social networks, they can, grow exponentially. And so I think we do need opportunities. We need rewards and recognition for those who take a leadership role with their colleagues. But I don't think hiring a bunch of experts like me or something to come and talk to people for 2 hours and then go away hasn't proven to be very effective. Mind you, people watching this video, of course, will learn a lot.
Of course, but just to ask you something, I take the mention you make about leadership, and I take it to the. Do you think the lack of leadership or political will makes the ecosystem for the private companies to fill that gap? Maybe.
Yeah.
Do you see it like that?
It sounds like you think that.
Yeah. Totally.
And I agree with you. Yeah, I do think that especially public universities, we have a sense of our own definition is that we're preserving culture, and we have a right to sort of sit outside of society and to be critics, and that's our job. Whereas I, as an educator, I feel like my first job is to educate and help people to learn. And then to be a researcher or to be a critic of society, well, that's nice, but that's not what I'm really about. I really should be making a contribution to people's knowledge, and helping them. At least that's, but then I'm in an education faculty, so maybe that's a bit of, I know if I was in physics, I probably wouldn't think that way, but nonetheless, I think we should be celebrating those physics teachers who want to develop their expertise, because they know that physics is changing. And yet they seem to think that education is stuck in a lecture mode, that's the way it is. And it's just not that way.
Terry, I don't know. A lot of people have focuses on what this intense digital experience had brought to traditional university, but see the phenomenon in the different focus. In your opinion, what have virtual university improved with this intense virtual training experience during this pandemic? Because one problem or one scenario is how the traditional university changed, traditional teaching model, face-to-face, but how the virtual university, the traditional virtual university, for example, the Open University, the WOC here in Spain, gained with this intense virtual training throughout this pandemic, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think it has been a great opportunity, and I know that a number of the open universities have increased their enrollments during the pandemic, but it's also been a time, I think, for the open universities to realize that there's lots of competition and there's lots of change that's happening. And they too have struggle with pedagogical models that, like, for instance, most of the biggest concern of many of the open universities is the final examination security. How can they make sure that nobody cheats on exams or something? We're back to the examination question, but these institutions, have been able to develop a model that is kind of pre-network, that really hasn't, really pushed the capacity for collaborative work, for student project learning, and some of the other things. We're still kind of in a didactic mode, even within the open universities. But having said that, I think that that many of them are feeling smug because they're saying, "Oh, well, finally, the real world is seeing what we've been doing all these years," kind of thing, and they're trying to do it. And then they also, of course, say, "But those other guys, these traditional universities, they're doing a mess of it. They're not as good at it as we are." And maybe that's true.
Yeah, sure, Terry. We are now just facing the end of the interview. We have only two more questions, and again, thank you a lot for sharing your thoughts. Of course, a lot of people will see the video, and we have to learn a lot more. So we thank you about this. But I wanted to ask you. I'm not asking for you to do futurology, right? But in your opinion, what will happen in higher education with this new digital educational ecosystem? Do you think it would be more and more amplified, the digital resources, or maybe after the pandemic, we will just run away from digital tools? Did I explain it well? You understand it?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I understand the question. Well, as I said earlier, I think that it will make changes that will not go away, that institutions will have had at least a small taste of it. I think, though, that we're going to see more differentiation. We will see more online institutions or components of a traditional university that have an online component, as they're trying to sort of get the best of both worlds. And I also think that it's going to be we're starting to realize that face-to-face education and living on campus, as they do in North America a lot, is really for rich people, and it isn't accessible for lifelong learning, nor for people who can't afford that kind of a luxury. So I'm encouraged that, again, getting back to access is the most important thing for online education, and it's giving access within COVID homes struck or isolated people, but and it's going to continue to do that. There will be institutions who, sort of pull back and say, "Oh, we're going back to the old times," and that will appeal to some people, and especially those who have more social economic status than others. But in the long run, I think that we're going to enter into a kind of a blended world where we start to be way more effective at using online resources. If they're, even for simple things like schedules or consultations or meeting with parents or whatever. I think it's just going to be another tool that we have to use, and we will get better using it.
Only one question more. It's only just to finish. I would like to ask you a message or some recommendation, maybe, to the university professor, teacher, lectors of campus university who have been afraid to develop their teacher practices in virtual environment, and from here on to their future practices.
Yeah. I guess I would just encourage them to take small steps, one day at a time kind of thing, to try to open up your computer and make a little video, and just to spend 10 minutes a day searching out learning resources in your subjects, open educational resources. There are just so many different opportunities and tools around, but none of us have had a lot of time or made a lot of time to investigate them. So I guess I would really encourage people that they don't have to go. in the post-COVID times, it's not going to be the same as it is now, where the government tells you you have to do it this way. You will get the opportunity to integrate these tools with your face-to-face teaching. And my final word maybe would be, it's a lot of fun, really. For most people, they enjoy learning. That's why they're in education. And if you can sort of get your 12-year-old son to help you get started, I think it'll be a way that you won't regret it at the end of the day.
Terry, wonderful. I wanted to thank you again for your time, for sharing your thoughts, your ideas. I hope you feel comfortable in this talk and hope to see you presentially soon.
Yes, right.
Maybe Barcelona.
I'd love that. I'm looking forward to seeing you and meeting you, Ezequiel.
Okay.
So,
Okay, Terry, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye now.